The brave stallion. In a lush valley surrounded by towering mountains, there lived a majestic black stallion named Thunder. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and his mane flowed like a river of silk in the wind. Thunder was the fastest horse in the valley, known for his speed and bravery. One fateful summer, a wildfire swept through the valley, threatening every creature in its path. The animals scattered in fear, running for their lives. But Thunder did not run. He stood atop a hill, watching the chaos unfold, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, he saw a group of foals trapped near a blazing grove of trees. Their mothers neighed desperately, unable to reach them. Without hesitation, Thunder galloped down the hill, his powerful hooves striking the ground like thunderclaps. He leaped over fallen branches and dashed through the smoke, guided only by the cries of the foals. When he reached them, the young horses huddled together, trembling with fear. Thunder gently nudged each one, encouraging them to follow him. Leading the foals through the smoke-filled forest was no easy task. Thunder used his strength and courage to clear a path, kicking away burning debris and shielding the young ones from harm. Despite the heat and danger, he never faltered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Thunder emerged from the forest with the foals trailing behind him. The herd erupted in cheers, and the mothers rushed to embrace their young. Thunder, exhausted but unbroken, stood tall, his eyes glowing with pride. From that day on, Thunder became a legend in the valley. He was not just the fastest horse, he was the bravest. And whenever the winds swept through the valley carrying the scent of distant storms, the animals would say it was Thunder, running free across the heavens, watching over them all. Would you like me to expand this story or write it in a different style? The next chapter, Thunder's legacy. Years passed, and Thunder's story became a legend in the valley. Parents told it to their young as they grazed under the moonlit sky, and the name Thunder was spoken with reverence. On the hill where he was laid to rest, wildflowers bloomed year-round, as if the land itself honored the brave stallion's memory. Among the herd was a young colt named Storm. He was Thunder's great-grandson, and though he had never met the legendary stallion, he felt a deep connection to him. Storm had inherited Thunder's striking black coat, though his was marked by a white streak that ran down his nose like a lightning bolt. But where Thunder had been calm and wise, Storm was spirited and impatient, always eager to prove himself. Storm grew up hearing stories of his great-grandfather's bravery. He dreamed of the day he might have his own chance to be a hero. Yet, as the years went by, life in the valley remained peaceful. There were no wildfires or landslides, no great challenges to overcome. Storm often stood on Thunder's hill, gazing at the horizon, wondering if he would ever find his purpose. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, a stranger arrived in the valley. He was an older horse, with a scar running down his side and a limp in his gait. His name was Ash, and he came from a faraway land. The herd gathered around him, curious about his story. Ash spoke of a neighboring valley, once as beautiful and abundant as theirs, but now in peril. The river there has dried up, he explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. The land is barren, and the animals are struggling to survive. I've come to ask for help. I've heard of the legendary Thunder, and I hoped his herd might carry his spirit of courage and unity. The herd murmured among themselves. The journey to the neighboring valley would be long and dangerous, and the task ahead seemed monumental. Yet Storm felt a spark ignite within him. This was his moment, his chance to follow in Thunder's hoofsteps. "I'll go," Storm declared, stepping forward. His voice was strong, though his heart raced. The herd fell silent, their eyes turning to the young colt. Storm's mother, a wise mare named Willow, stepped forward. "Storm, this is no small task," she said gently. "You're brave, but bravery alone won't be enough. Are you certain you're ready for this?" "I have to try," Storm replied. "If Thunder could save this valley, then I can help save another. It's what he would have done." Willow looked at her son, seeing the determination in his eyes. Though she was worried, she nodded. "Then you won't go alone," she said. "We'll send a small group to help guide you." The next morning, Storm set out with a handful of companions, his mother Willow, Ash the Scarred Traveler, and a few other strong and experienced horses from the herd. The journey was grueling. They crossed rocky ridges, dense forests, and dry plains, facing challenges at every turn. Storm struggled at times, his youthful energy giving way to exhaustion. But each time he faltered, he remembered Thunder's story and found the strength to continue. After days of travel, they reached the neighboring valley. What they saw broke their hearts. The land was cracked and dry, the trees bare, and the animals thin and weak. The riverbed was little more than a dusty scar across the earth. Storm turned to Ash. "What happened here?" he asked. Ash explained that a dam built by humans upstream had diverted the water, leaving the valley to wither. The animals had tried to adapt, but without the river, they had little hope. "If we can break the dam, the river will flow again," Ash said. "But it won't be easy." Storm felt a wave of doubt. Breaking a human-made dam was no small feat. But he pushed the doubt aside. "We'll find a way," he said firmly. The group worked tirelessly to rally the animals of the valley. Beavers, bears, and birds joined forces once again, guided by the wisdom of Willow and the determination of Storm. They devised a plan to weaken the dam using their combined strength and ingenuity. On the third night, under the light of a full moon, they made their move. The bears clawed at the wooden beams, while the beavers chewed through the supports. Birds carried small stones to weaken the structure. Storm directed the effort, his voice ringing out above the noise. Finally, with a great groan, the dam began to crack. Water surged through the gaps and the animals scrambled to safety as the river roared to life. The dam collapsed and the river rushed down the valley, filling the dry bed and soaking into the parched earth. The land seemed to sigh with relief. The animals cheered, their voices echoing through the night. Storm stood by the riverbank, his coat glistening with sweat, his heart swelling with pride. He had done it. He had followed in Thunder's hoofsteps, not by trying to be a hero, but by leading with courage and compassion. When Storm returned to his valley, he was met with a hero's welcome. The herd celebrated his bravery, and from that day on, Storm was no longer just the spirited young colt. He was a leader, a protector, and a reminder that Thunder's legacy lived on, not just in his bloodline, but in the hearts of all who called the valley home. And when the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of distant storms, the animals would lift their heads and listen. They would say it was Thunder and Storm, running side by side across the heavens, their spirits forever guarding the lands they had saved. The legacy of Thunder. The valley healed slowly after the wildfire. The charred trees began to sprout new leaves, and wildflowers timidly pushed through the scorched earth. Life returned, but the memory of the fire remained etched in the hearts of the animals. Thunder, the brave stallion who had risked everything to save the foals, became a figure of reverence. Yet Thunder himself remained humble. For him, the act of saving the young ones was simply what his heart had compelled him to do. Seasons came and went, and Thunder grew older. His once jet-black coat now carried streaks of gray, and his movements, though still graceful, were slower than before. Yet his spirit remained as strong as ever, and his presence continued to command respect. The younger horses of the herd often gathered around him, eager to hear his wisdom and stories. He taught them not just about speed and strength, but about courage, unity, and the importance of protecting one another. One spring morning, Thunder noticed something unusual. The river that ran through the valley, the lifeblood of the land, was flowing slower than usual. Its waters, once crystal clear, had turned murky and shallow. The animals in the valley grew uneasy. Thunder, ever observant, decided to investigate. With a small group of younger stallions and mares, he set off upstream to find the source of the trouble. The journey was arduous, taking them through dense forests and steep rocky terrain. Thunder's experience guided them, and he encouraged the younger horses to stay alert and work together. Along the way, they encountered other animals, beavers, otters, and deer, who were also concerned about the dwindling water. Eventually, they reached the upper reaches of the river. What they found shocked them. A massive landslide had occurred, blocking the river's flow with rocks, soil, and fallen trees. The once mighty stream now trickled weakly, unable to sustain the valley below. The animals that depended on it were at risk of thirst and starvation. Thunder stood atop a large boulder, surveying the scene. His sharp mind began to devise a plan. He knew they couldn't clear the debris alone, but with the help of every creature in the valley, they might stand a chance. He turned to the younger horses and said, "Go back to the valley. Spread the word. Tell everyone, deer, bears, birds, every creature, that their help is needed. Together, we can restore the river." The young horses galloped off, their hooves pounding the ground with urgency. Thunder remained behind, studying the blockage and planning how best to clear it. He paced along the riverbank, testing the strength of the debris and searching for weak points. Within a day, animals began to arrive. The valley's residents, inspired by Thunder's leadership, came in droves. The beavers brought their knowledge of waterways, the bears used their immense strength to move heavy logs, and the birds carried away smaller twigs and debris. Even the rabbits and squirrels joined in, digging and clearing soil. Under Thunder's guidance, they worked tirelessly. The task was monumental. Days turned into weeks, and the animals grew weary. Thunder, despite his age, worked alongside them, his determination unwavering. He encouraged those who grew tired, reminding them of the importance of their efforts. "We are stronger together," he said. "This valley is our home, and we must protect it." Finally, after weeks of labor, the blockage began to give way. With one final push, the animals cleared the last of the debris. The river roared back to life, its waters rushing down the valley, clear and strong once more. Cheers and cries of joy echoed through the mountains as the animals celebrated their victory. Thunder stood by the riverbank, watching the water flow freely. He felt a deep sense of pride, not for himself, but for the unity and resilience of the valley's creatures. They had faced yet another challenge together and had emerged stronger. In the years that followed, Thunder's story grew even larger. He became a symbol not just of bravery, but of leadership and unity. The valley thrived, and the lessons he had taught the younger generations endured. One peaceful morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Thunder stood on his favorite hill, overlooking the valley he loved so dearly. He felt the wind in his mane and the earth beneath his hooves. The stallion closed his eyes, content. His work was done, and he knew the valley would be safe in the hands of those he had inspired. When Thunder finally passed, the herd mourned deeply. They buried him on the hill where he had often stood, marking the spot with a circle of wildflowers. But his spirit lived on in the valley, in the strength of the river, the unity of the herd, and the stories told under the starlit skies. And when the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of distant storms, the animals would lift their heads and listen. They would say it was Thunder, running free across the heavens, his spirit forever guarding the land he had saved and loved. The rise of the herd. After Storm's triumphant return, the valley thrived under his leadership. His bravery had not only cemented his place as a leader, but had also inspired many young horses to dream of their own adventures. Storm became a mentor, teaching the herd the values of courage, teamwork, and the legacy of protecting not just their valley, but others in need. One autumn morning, a new challenge arose. A herd of travelers appeared on the horizon, their coats dusty and their eyes weary. They were led by a striking mare named Ember, whose golden coat shimmered even in the dim light. Her herd had traveled far, driven from their home by a severe drought that had left their valley barren. Ember approached Storm with a mixture of hope and desperation. "We've heard of your courage, Storm," she said, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "Your name travels faster than the wind. My herd is in need of refuge. We have nothing left, and your valley is the only hope we have." Storm listened intently. He felt a pang of sympathy for Ember and her herd, but he also knew his valley had its limits. The arrival of so many new horses would strain their resources, and his herd was already wary of outsiders. Still, Storm remembered Thunder's teachings. Courage wasn't just about facing danger, but also about doing what was right, even when it was difficult. "You and your herd are welcome here," Storm said finally, "but we must work together to ensure there is enough for everyone. We'll need to expand our grazing lands and strengthen the riverbanks to support us all." Ember nodded, her gratitude shining in her eyes. "We will help in any way we can. My herd is strong, and we will prove our worth." In the weeks that followed, The two herds worked side by side. The older horses shared their wisdom, while the younger ones used their boundless energy to help rebuild the valley. Together, they expanded the grazing lands, planting seeds that would grow into lush grass. They reinforced the riverbanks with stones and logs, ensuring the water flowed steadily even during dry spells. As the herds bonded, new friendships blossomed. Ember and Storm became close allies, their mutual respect growing into something deeper. Together, they shared stories of their struggles and dreams for the future. Ember revealed her own fears of leading her herd through such perilous times, and Storm reassured her that strength wasn't measured by never feeling fear, but by facing it. One evening, as the herds gathered around a clearing, an older mare named Sage spoke up. "Our two herds have grown strong together," she said, her voice wise and steady. "But we must ensure that future generations remember the importance of unity. We should form a council, a gathering of leaders from both herds, to guide us forward." The idea was met with widespread approval. Storm and Ember agreed to co-lead the council, with Sage and a few others serving as advisors. The council's first act was to establish a tradition. Every year, the herds would come together to celebrate their unity with a festival. They would call it the Gathering of Hooves, a day of stories, races, and feasts to honor the courage and cooperation that had brought them together. As the years passed, the herds grew stronger and more united. Foals born into this new alliance were taught the stories of Thunder, Storm, and Ember. They learned about the importance of standing together, not just as a herd, but as part of a greater community that extended beyond their valley. But the peace was not to last forever. One spring, scouts from the council reported troubling news. A third herd from the northern plains was approaching. This herd, led by a formidable stallion named Shadow, was known for its ruthless tactics. Shadow's herd had a reputation for taking what they needed by force, and they had no intention of asking for permission to graze in the valley. When Shadow and his herd arrived at the edge of the valley, Storm, Ember, and the council confronted him. Shadow was a massive stallion with a dark coat and piercing eyes. He sneered at their attempts at diplomacy. "This valley is lush and bountiful," Shadow said. "We will take what we need. Stand in our way, and you'll regret it." Storm stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This valley thrives because we work together. If you come in peace, there is a place for you here. But if you bring violence, you will find we are stronger than you think." Shadow laughed. "Stronger? Your herd is soft, filled with foals and tired mares. You won't last a day against us." But Shadow underestimated the strength of unity. Over the next few days, Storm and Ember rallied their herds. They devised a plan to defend the valley, using the natural terrain to their advantage. The younger horses scouted Shadow's herd, while the older ones prepared defenses along the riverbank and hills. When Shadow's herd launched their attack, they were met with fierce resistance. The united herds fought not with brute force, but with strategy and teamwork. They used their knowledge of the valley to outmaneuver Shadow's forces, driving them back at every turn. Ember led a group of swift mares to cut off Shadow's retreat, while Storm faced the stallion himself in a final confrontation. As their hooves pounded the earth, Storm's words rang in Shadow's ears. "This valley is strong because we protect each other. You'll never take that from us." In the end, Shadow's herd was defeated, and Shadow himself, realizing the strength of the united herds, conceded. "I see now why this valley thrives," he admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps there's more strength in unity than I thought." Shadow and his herd were allowed to stay, but under strict conditions set by the council. Over time, even they came to understand the values of cooperation and trust. The valley, now home to 3 herds, became a beacon of hope. Horses from far and wide traveled to learn from their ways. And when the winds swept through the valley, carrying the scent of distant storms, the horses would lift their heads and listen, knowing that Thunder's legacy lived on, not just in one stallion, but in a community that had learned to stand together, stronger than ever, the United Valley. As the years passed, the 3 herds thrived together, growing stronger in their unity. The valley had become a sanctuary, a place where every horse, young or old, strong or weak, had a role to play. Shadow's herd, once hardened by conflict, had softened under the guidance of Storm, Ember, and the Council. Shadow himself became an advisor, offering his knowledge of survival in harsh conditions and slowly earning the trust of the other herds. But peace is never without its challenges. One autumn, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew crisp, the scouts reported a strange phenomenon. The river, the lifeblood of the valley, was running lower than usual, even though the rains had been plentiful. At first, the herds thought it might be another blockage upstream, like in the days of Thunder. But as the council investigated, they discovered something far more alarming. A group of humans had settled near the source of the river. They were constructing a dam, larger and more permanent than anything the animals had seen before. This dam wasn't made of wood, but of stone and iron, and it was cutting off the water supply to the valley. The herds had faced challenges before, but this was unlike anything they had encountered. The council convened immediately. Storm, Ember, Shadow, and Sage stood at the center of the gathering, their faces grave. The other horses murmured anxiously, their fear evident. "This dam will destroy the valley if it is completed," Storm said, his voice steady. "We must act quickly." "But how?" asked a young mare named Dawn, her eyes wide with worry. "We can't fight humans the way we fought Shadow's herd. They are too powerful." Ember stepped forward, her golden coat catching the fading sunlight. "We cannot fight them directly, but we can disrupt their plans. We know this land better than they do. If we work together, we can find a way to stop this dam." Shadow, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Humans are relentless. I've seen their work before. If we want to stop them, we'll need more than strategy. We'll need courage and unity like never before." The council agreed to divide their efforts. Storm and Ember would lead a group of horses to observe the humans and find weaknesses in their construction. Shadow would train the younger horses in stealth and distraction tactics, while Sage would organize the rest of the herd to prepare for any unforeseen consequences, such as a sudden flood or drought. For weeks, the herds worked tirelessly. Storm and Ember's team crept close to the human camp under the cover of darkness, studying their movements. They discovered that the humans relied heavily on machinery to build the dam. If they could sabotage the machines, they might be able to slow the construction. Shadow, meanwhile, taught the younger horses how to move silently through the forest, creating diversions to draw the humans away from their work. He was gruff and demanding, but the young horses admired him, knowing he was preparing them for an important mission. Finally, the time came to act. On a moonless night, Storm, Ember, Shadow, and their teams approached the human camp. The plan was simple but risky: create enough chaos to halt the construction and make the humans rethink their efforts. The younger horses, under Shadow's leadership, started by creating distractions. They knocked over supplies, scattered tools, and led the humans on wild chases through the forest. Meanwhile, Storm and Ember's group targeted the machinery. Using their strength and precision, they loosened bolts, chewed through ropes, and toppled smaller structures. The humans, overwhelmed by the chaos, were unable to focus on their work. The operation was not without danger. At one point, a young colt named Blaze was cornered by a human, but Shadow appeared just in time, his powerful hooves striking the ground as he led the human away. Storm and Ember worked tirelessly, ensuring every horse made it back to safety. By dawn, the camp was in disarray. The humans, frustrated by the setbacks, packed up their tools and left, at least for the time being. The herds watched from the hills, their hearts swelling with pride. They had done the impossible, not through force, but through unity and cleverness. The river began to flow freely again, and the valley was saved. But the council knew this victory was only temporary. The humans might return, and they would need to be ready. Storm, Ember, and Shadow agreed to continue strengthening the herds, teaching them not only how to defend their home, but also how to adapt and coexist with the challenges of the changing world. As the herds gathered to celebrate their victory, Sage spoke once more. "Today, we have proven that unity is our greatest strength. Let this be a lesson to us all. No matter the challenge, we are stronger together." The celebration lasted well into the night, with races, songs, and stories shared under the stars. The foals listened intently as the elders told the tales of Thunder, Storm, Ember, and Shadow, weaving their legacies into the fabric of the valley's history. And when the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of distant storms, the horses lifted their heads and listened. They would say it was the spirits of Thunder and his descendants, running together across the heavens, watching over the valley and its united herds. The return of the humans. The herds enjoyed several seasons of peace following their successful defense of the valley. The river flowed freely, the grasslands flourished, and the bonds between the herds grew stronger than ever. But beneath the surface, an unspoken concern lingered. The humans might one day return, and the herds knew they had only delayed the inevitable. It was during the first frost of winter when the scouts returned with troubling news. A new group of humans had arrived at the edge of the valley, and this time, they weren't just building a dam. They were marking the land with strange flags and digging into the earth. Their numbers were greater than before, and their tools and machines seemed far more advanced. The council gathered immediately. Storm, Ember, Shadow, and Sage stood at the center of the circle, their expressions grave. The herds listened in tense silence as the scouts described what they had seen. "This isn't like last time," one of the scouts said. "They're not just taking the river, they're taking the land." Storm's jaw tightened. He had seen the destruction humans could cause, and he knew the valley would not survive if the humans continued their work. "We cannot let them destroy our home," Storm said firmly. "But this time, we must be smarter. Fighting them directly will only bring harm to us all." Ember nodded in agreement. "We need a new plan, one that will send a message to the humans and make them see this valley as not theirs to take." Shadow, who had been studying the humans from a distance, stepped forward. "Humans are clever, but they also rely heavily on order and control. If we disrupt their work enough, they may decide this land isn't worth the trouble." The council spent the night devising a strategy. This time, they would combine the strengths of every herd, using their numbers and skills to outsmart the humans. Sage suggested enlisting the help of other animals in the valley: deer, bears, birds, and even the sly foxes who roamed the forest. The plan began with reconnaissance. Storm led a group of stealthy horses to observe the humans' camp. They discovered that the humans had brought heavy machinery to dig into the earth and build permanent structures. They also noticed that the humans relied on specific supply routes to bring in materials. Ember took charge of rallying the other animals. The birds agreed to act as lookouts, keeping an eye on the humans from above. The deer and foxes would serve as messengers, while the bears, with their immense strength, would help dismantle the humans' equipment. As the days grew colder, the herds launched their campaign. Under the cover of darkness, they worked together to disrupt the humans' operations. The bears rolled boulders onto the supply roads, blocking the humans' access to their materials. The foxes scattered tools and supplies, while the birds swooped down to snatch small objects, creating confusion. Storm and Shadow led a team to target the machinery. Using their strength and precision, they loosened bolts, tore apart ropes, and tipped over smaller machines. Ember and her group focused on driving the humans away from key areas, using carefully planned distractions to keep them off balance. Despite their efforts, the humans proved more persistent than before. Each time the animals disrupted their work, the humans quickly repaired the damage and continued. The valley's residents grew weary, and doubts began to creep in. One evening, as the herds rested near the river, Storm stood before them. His coat was streaked with mud, and his eyes were tired, but his voice remained steady. "We cannot give up now," he said. "The valley is worth fighting for. Thunder faced challenges far greater than this, and he never gave up. Neither will we." His words reignited the herd's determination. The next day, they launched their most daring plan yet. Working together, they created a massive diversion, leading the humans away from their camp. While the humans were distracted, the animals destroyed the foundation of their largest structure, rendering it unusable. When the humans returned to find their work in ruins, they began to argue among themselves. Over the next few days, their activity slowed, and their numbers began to dwindle. Finally, on a cold winter morning, the humans packed up their machines and left the valley. The herds watched from the hills as the last of the humans disappeared over the horizon. Cheers erupted as they realized they had won. The valley was safe, for now. Storm, Ember, Shadow, and Sage stood together on the hill where Thunder was buried. The wind swept through their manes as they gazed out over the valley. "This isn't the end," Ember said softly. "The humans will return one day." "Maybe," Storm replied. "But when they do, we'll be ready. As long as we stand together, there's nothing we can't face." Shadow nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "You've taught me that unity is the greatest strength of all. This valley will endure because of it." Sage, the wisest of them all, added, "And Thunder's legacy will continue to guide us, as it always has." As the seasons turned, the herds continued to thrive, ever vigilant and united. The valley became a symbol of resilience and hope, not just for the horses, but for all the animals who called it home. And when the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of distant storms, they lifted their heads and listened. They knew it was the spirits of Thunder, Storm, and all who had fought to protect their home, running free across the heavens, forever watching over the land they loved.